was listening to a YouTube video, and it doesn't really make sense to say what the video was about, because what I'm talking about, what I'm thinking about right now, has really nothing to do with that video. But what that video made me think about was that I agreed with what much of this person was saying, but it makes me think about language. I've heard a lot about how the Bible talks about Babylon and how Babylon fell because the language was split. And so I think about the language of an era, the language of a time, the language of a people. And how they communicate. You know, if the message intended is not the message received, how far can we go? When I say something, you think something, and vice versa. When you say something, I think something. What are the rules of the language we speak? And what are the definitions of the terms that we use? If I don't understand the rules of the language and or the definitions of the terms that I use, then when I attempt to calculate the math of language, how can I come to the same conclusion? Lately, I've been thinking a lot about how language is a sort of magic. I think of magic as something that it's a word, it's a concept that people use when they try to describe something that they don't understand, that they can't comprehend. They don't know how it works. In a sense, it's not tangible. And as I understand the word tangible, it's not something you can touch. Language is not something you can touch. Words are not something you can touch. And so you have to have a sort of sixth sense in order to be able to grasp the concept of what language really is, but it's immersed in our day-to-day experience. And so, you know, animals, there's multiple ways to communicate. And I know that with myself, I think sometimes that, or I used to think anyhow, this thought is evolving, that because dogs don't have words like we do, that they don't communicate. But I don't exactly view that the same anymore. Because communication is reference. And so if I can refer something to you, if I can refer information to you, however that may be, I can influence your thought level, or your thought process rather, or I can have an impact on that, and then you can respond to the information that you received through the communication. And I would say pretty much every living thing communicates on some level. But there's a nature to all of human life, or to the living things that I observe. It's an animalistic communication. Words are not necessary. And the reason that this thought is important to me is because the way that words hypnotize us it almost separates us from that animalistic form of communication. You know, kind of like maybe you've had a friend or a family member who was something wasn't quite right, and when you walked in, you felt it. And you may have used language to try to clarify it, but initially, you felt it, and that's the only way to describe it. It's a feeling. It's too abstract to really specify. I could think of it as there's tiers of communication, but like the serpent, the serpent that eats its tail, or like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the cyclical nature of life. We need to cycle back to our origins and to our nature so that we can stay in alignment with our day-to-day life. And so the way we communicate, the way we receive information impacts the way we think and draws us away from an observation of reality. And in our heads, we can be as far out as we want to, but in this world where I press record on the phone and post it to the internet, this is the world that we all share. And so I gotta find a way to pass this information on to you the way I intend it to be. So I have to know your language, I have to know your tongue, I have to know how you define things, and I have to know the rules of your language. Because this thing we call life is a cooperation. It's an operation of multiple people. And so if we want to have harmony, we have to have comprehension of the rules of communication and the definitions of the terms that we use and all the different ways that we express information. And then there's also the emotions that are affected by the information that we receive as well, which I think is a separate video, but this thought is just a work in progress for me. It's new, but I think that it's worth exploring. It's necessary to explore, and I think that if I could communicate this thought properly and effectively, and we could get in harmony, I think the idea of the idea that I'm trying to express could potentially lead to solutions of many different things. And I'll end the video with this. When I go to the bar, and I say the bar because fights happen a lot there for many reasons, but one of the reasons that I think about is because miscommunication. A lot of times, the majority of the time, I say a fight happens because someone feels embarrassed or disrespected. Now, at this moment, there may be a third reason, but I can only think of those two. But that embarrassment and that disrespect probably was heavily influenced by miscommunication. You know, sometimes when you walk through the crowd, all you need to do is say, "Excuse me, sorry about that, thank you." Because if you don't, maybe someone can take your presence or something that you did as, "Oh, I need to respond. I've been insulted." And then it becomes a bigger problem. That's just an example. But every one of us are here attempting to grow and to live out what we find, what we come to believe through experience, through trial and error, and we try to leave our legacy, have our impact on the world. But communication is necessary. Language is necessary. The era, the language of an era, the tongue of a people, the understanding of a generation, the comprehension of a generation, the mindset of a time, the mindset of a people is, insofar as I can tell right now, always affected by the tongue that they speak. If this made any sense to anybody, which I hope it did, obviously, let me know.